just going to introduce myself short. My name is Ayya Santacitta, and I'm originally from Austria. And, I'm a nun since over 30 years and trained in what's called the Thai forest tradition and also in the Nyingma tradition of Tibetan Buddhism. And I came to America in 2009. First lived in San Francisco for a few years in the Outer Sunset, and then in the Sierra foothills near Placerville in a forest monastery for about 8 years, and now I am at the Aloka Earth Room in San Rafael, just over the Golden Gate Bridge. Not far from here, but was still a long haul to get here today. And I've brought some cards from the Aloka Earth Room, which are here at the table, if you want to have a look. And since the last 10 years, I'm increasingly interested in weaving together earth awareness and the early Buddhist teaching. And that's, the motivation behind the Aloka Earth Room, which is a space, which is expressing that intention also in visuals, so to say. And because I think we need all support we can get, to get our minds around this shift, which we need to all help to happen. And the teaching today, which I want to share with you, is also along those same lines. Is it you, Wendy? Yeah. Hi, Wendy. That's Wendy who drove me. So just maybe take some time to land here. And just, I feel probably quite different than you all feel here because I feel a bit agitated. Allowing the breath to take you into the body, and just checking out how you are, how you feel. Just been sitting 1.5 hours in the car, trying to get just less than 20 miles to drive. So this, this very super complex world we are living in, where things are getting more and more complicated. And sensing the weight of the body on the cushion on the chair, where the body meets the surface on which you're sitting, the pressure, the weight, the hardness. And you're not any stress or any tension, allowing that to just drop down into the ground below where we are sitting. Letting go of any tension. And with the in-breath, breathing up the stability, the vastness, the stillness of the earth. Oh, I mean, you know, it's a bit of a big theme for a 2.5-hour meeting, the Noble Eightfold Path, but one, you know, one can scratch the surface a little bit, and that's better than not doing anything about it. And I've you know, given all of you that handout, and maybe can you screen share that in? You have the PDF. So this is like a little ground plan, you know, for what's called the Noble Eightfold Path. And the Noble Eightfold Path is, you know, part of the first teaching which the Buddha has given, you know, after his awakening. And it said he gave that teaching in Saranath, which is near Varanasi in India. And in Pali, it's called the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. And in English, that means, you know, the sutta which sets in motion the wheel of Dharma or the wheel of Dhamma. And the Noble Eightfold Path consists of 3 parts, of 3 areas. And so on that piece of paper I've handed out, we can start, you know, with the part in the middle, which is called, on this handout, it's called ethics, but we can also call it discipline, you know, ethics and discipline. Then the second part would be grounding or concentration. And the third part is insight or wisdom and letting go. So those 3, they need to work together in order for any kind of letting go naturally kind of happening. And the best way, you know, to do this is to start with discipline and ethics. You know, after one has tried all other things and they haven't worked out, sooner or later we all figure that out. And then we feel, sooner or later, feel inspired, you know, to work with ethics, not because we want to be a good boy or good girl or anything like that, but because it simply does work, you know. Even the President of the United States doesn't really believe in that, but he will find out sooner or later as well, you know, because you can't really live against ethics for too long without having some serious repercussions. And, you know, and if we have a certain discipline, a certain understanding about how things work, grounding becomes possible. And if there's grounding, then the mind can focus. And if the mind is focused, the mind can see how things really work. And then the mind adjusts to it. And we experience that as a form of letting go, you know, that we can let go of things which for some time before we didn't think we could, you know, because we hadn't really had enough capacity to see deep enough and wide enough that we can, you know, adjust our way, you know, how we conduct our lives according to what we see in the meditation. And this little ground plan here, you know, is in English and in Pali. It's written, and I thought you could chant it with me together if you can try, you know. It's a very simple way of chanting in the Pali language. So I'm going to chant one round, you know, and then afterwards you can chant along with me. And that's just the 8 components of the Noble Eightfold Path, starting with right understanding and going down the list. Samma Ditti, Samma Sankappa, Samma Vaca, Samma Kammanta, Samma Achiva, Samma Vayama, Samma Sati, Samma Samadhi. Samma Ditti, Samma Sankappa, Samma Vaca, Samma Kammanta, Kammanta, Samma Achiva, Samma Vayama, Samma Sati, Samma Samadhi, Samma Ditti, Samma Sankappa, Samma Vacha, Samma Kammanta, Samma Achiva, Samma Vayama, Samma Sati, Samma Samadhi, Samma Ditti, Samma Sankappa, Samma Vacha, Samma Kammanta, Samma Achiva, Samma Vayama, Samma Sati, Samma Samadhi. Thank you. So that's basically the ground plan of the Noble Eightfold Path. And it always, when it's written down, it often starts with right understanding and right thought or right intention. But actually, in order to have a real, so that can be the first kind of motivation, to work on the second part, which is right speech, which means not lying, basically, is the main intention of right speech, and then right action and right livelihood. And then, in order to really embody those, we need the right effort and right mindfulness and right concentration. So those 8 parts, they are like 8 strands of a rope. They are not like you first have to master right understanding, and then you do right thought, and then you do that and that. They always, they always work together, and they can't be really, separated out from each other. But in terms of speaking or writing, we need to write it down in some way, so it's written down that way. And so that is, the ground plan and the part of the first teaching that Buddha has ever given, after his awakening. And it is also called, it's also in a part of what's called the Four Noble Truths, which is the very basic teaching. Probably everybody of you have you heard about the Four Noble Truths? Yeah. So the Four Noble Truths, they're considered the elephant footprint of the teaching, because all the teachings fit inside of the Four Noble Truths. And the path itself is the force of the Four Noble Truths. So the first one is, that there is basically life is stressful or life is difficult. It's the first noble truth. Second noble truth is, where does it come from, the stress and the suffering, comes from, from clinging and grasping. For example, when I was, driving over here, I wanted to be on time, and I wanted to inform you, and I think which was probably a good intention to have, but then if you're getting too obsessed with it, then you create a lot of trouble actually for yourself, So seeing that, and then the third noble truth is the medicine, how can that suffering, be reduced or completely ended, is through, through letting go, basically, through investigating, the origin of suffering, the grasping, the clinging, and to really see how does it feel, and to meet that with a lot of curiosity and kindness, allowing it to be really understood, which means my first teacher, Ajahn Sumedho, he always said to understand, to really stand under it, which means you to really go close and feel how that feels, that wanting something to be different than from what it is. And then there's nothing wrong about that, but just really seeing that this is actually the underlying reason for the pain, for the stress, is that clinging, and we can't like wish the clinging to go away, but we can, if we really pay a detailed and full attention to it, then the system starts to adjust. The system just is gonna let go if it really sees where the suffering is coming from, and then really staying with it and allowing it to slowly but surely, kind of opening up. Not by forcing it, but by really taking the care of observing it really deeply, then the letting go is the answer, of if you're really paying attention to something. And even, we might have a vision for it to go away, or for it to be different, for not experiencing it. All of that needs to be seen for what it is, and really allowing it to inform us, which means, to be really felt inside of the form of the body. And quite often, it's going to be probably some kind of feeling here in the torso, maybe like in the chest, in the heart area, and and really taking an interest in that. And we can say in a way, the Noble Eightfold Path, as it's laid out here, is more like it's a scaffolding, to hold on and to lean into when it's really difficult, so that you can have the resilience of being able to endure the discomfort, and to have the resilience needed in order for clarity to become available, And usually, if we don't have the resilience, if we don't have the stability, then we tend to get wrapped up into it, and just do things in order to not have to deal with the discomfort. And quite a lot of people here, I've heard, you have had something to do with some kind of substance, which you try to not feel your suffering, not feel your pain. And I've done that too, before I became a nun. I just got fed up with that when I was like about in my 30s, when I was 28, actually my mother died very suddenly, from an accident, horse riding accident. And then after that, I just felt like I want to understand, what this is all about. And I didn't want to anymore distract myself, because I felt like to really turn towards it is a much more efficient way of dealing with it, But of course, to turn towards it without any support is really not doable. It's too difficult. So, and then, I didn't know, where to find that support, but I just was convinced that there is people who know about how to do it, And then I had the good fortune when I met my first teacher when I was 30 years old, and when I saw him, he was an old monk in Thailand. I had a feeling he knows about how you can cool out the system, and that he had some kind of scaffolding to offer, because he was embodying it so clearly, in the way how his presence was. And that's how I got interested in this. And practicing it now I started to practice in the late 80s. And so it's quite a long time now. And I think it really works, But it doesn't spare you the detox, of feeling all of the things which we have been trying to not feel, and just trying to shelf them somewhere and hoping it will just go away by itself. But that is not happening. We do need to sense and feel, and then if we do that with a lot of, with some discipline and some groundedness, some concentration, then it starts to inform the system, and then things do loosen up, but it takes time, and it takes a lot of, repetition of that work. It's not just going to be done with a few sessions of meditation, but it's a long haul, but it gets easier, as we are doing it. And we really need what's called like the long-term view, to be able to have the resilience of staying with it. And the Buddha, has been totally taking the long-term view, and especially when we are looking back at the insights he had in the night of his awakening, and apropos, the night of his awakening, it's supposed, people say that it happened in the full moon in May, which was actually Monday, 6 days ago. It's called Vesak. It's the big holiday for Buddhists. They say that the Buddha God, was born, awakened, and passed away on the full moon in May. I don't know if that's really true, but that's what is said. And and people say, he was sitting under the Bodhi tree in Bodh Gaya, and he had in that night, he had like 3 major insights, and the first one was that he, recollected his past lives, the many times he had been coming and going, and seeing, that there is no escape, from this long chain of coming and going. As long as there is ignorance and grasping, we're always going to come back again and again. So that was one really formative insight he had. And then the second one was, seeing that beings are born according to their actions, to their actions with intention, and other influences as well. But this is something we can really do something about, because we can train our minds. So that was the second insight he had. And then, being motivated by those two, he, would go even further than that, and really kind of, seeing that as long as there is grasping and clinging, through greed, hatred, and delusion, basically, there'll always be an identity, and there's always a way of needing to come back and continuing, to learn from one's experience. So those 3 insights, they motivated him to then, share that understanding as the 4 Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path. And we are still working with that teaching today, over 2,600 years ago. It's very, very practical teaching, very pragmatic teaching, and there's not a lot, we need to believe, but we can just try it out for ourselves, basically, if it works or not. And yeah, so I'm wondering, if there's, I've been already doing quite a lot of talking. Is there any questions? Would anybody like to ask something about what I've said so far? Either online, or here. And maybe you can, you can stop the screen share now. And if anybody would like to comment something or ask something before I go, before I continue. Okay. And then I wanted to mention something else, because there's like a fourth thing which happened in that night, So those three insights I've just been mentioning, those three higher knowledges, the recollection of past lives, and then the second one, the divine eye, seeing how people are reborn after they are dying, and that they are reborn according to the quality of their mind. And then the third one is, the freedom of greed, hatred, and delusion. And then the fourth one was, that in the night of his awakening, the Buddha was, as he was like sitting under that Bodhi tree, and practicing, a lot of challenges came up in his mind. And in the scriptures, the challenges are basically personified as Mara. I don't know if you've heard about that, So Mara was challenging him with all kinds of weaponry, throwing against him. And every time that came to him, he was saying, I know you, Mara. So he knew, what kind of fears came up or thoughts, of having self-doubt and all kinds of difficult challenges, and in the moment they came up, he would say, I see you, Mara. And then the weaponry would turn into flowers, and basically rain down on him as a blessing, because he used all of those challenges as a means to cultivate wisdom and compassion in himself, So not becoming those challenges, but knowing that they have a reason, and then knowing that they have a beginning, a middle, and an end. So, and then the last question, which Mara was throwing at him, was saying, who do you think you are, that you think you can get enlightened? And then the Buddha didn't say anything, but what he did do is he was touching the earth, and here you can see that Buddha statue here has an earth touching mudra, like that. So he was asking the earth, to be his witness that he has done the work. And then the earth was trembling in response. That's how it's said, in the story. That story actually hasn't made it into the Pali Canon. It's a story in the Jataka tales, which is not considered real central part of the canon. So it has not really been, taken serious and written down, because the people who've written down the suttas were not really interested in that kind of information. But it's passed down as a story, at least, as a myth. And so, the Buddha's teaching are also, passed on inside of a worldview. They are not immune against the agendas, of the people who have been passing them down. And that's also, part of the work what we need to do, is to bring the teachings into this time and see what has been left out, And so there's I see you, Mara. And knowing, the Buddha, when he's touching the earth, he's basically acknowledging, that he isn't independent from sustenance and independent from nourishment and independent from support, in particular the support from the earth, all the food and the whole body is an earth body which cannot live independent, from the earth. And that's that insight, which we need to really pay attention to at this time, where there's so much confusion about how to meet these times, where there is a lot of either, people try to willfully not talk about it or think about it and pretend it's not happening, or wanting to go somewhere else, go to Mars or go to heaven, or these different options, which are all very unrealistic. And so I think, that piece of the story which was left out because it wasn't really fitting into the agenda of the people who wrote it down, that seems to become very, very important for us at this time. And that beautiful gesture, of the earth touching, that's all, we all need to kind of remember that now, I think, and becoming conscious, how these bodies which we have, these Homo sapiens, means basically, or human bodies, human, the word human comes from the same root as the word humus, which is another word for earth or soil. And it's also the same root of the word humility. So human, humus, humility. And the word human, translated means actually earthling. So we have these names even, but it looks like we are not very much in touch with it, because it hasn't been necessary for quite a long time, but now it becomes very important, I think, to remember that these bodies of ours, they have basically been, they have arisen out of the body of the earth through our, through our mothers. They have been like the mediators for that, but they are made out of food, out of water, out of the breath we breathe, and the minerals which are come to us from the earth body as well. So we are basically a walking piece of planet, and that's something which isn't immediately visible, when you look at a body, but if you really stop long enough and contemplate, it becomes obvious, and and that kind of contemplation, to allow that to, to become a really important part of our educational system, that, it starts maybe like in spiritual circles, like here and other places, but it needs to become kind of basically a mainstream understanding, because it is totally true. And in order for us, to be able to imagine how to go forward, we need to first, understand ourselves differently in order to be able to understand the world differently. In order to be able to grow out of this old paradigm, we need to start with ourselves. Otherwise, we're just, repeating the same old story again and again. And it can't be really just an intellectual understanding. It needs to be a felt sense. It needs to be, a really deep understanding through sensing into this deep belonging, to the earth, through the fact that these bodies are in no way separate. And that takes a lot of curiosity. really being interested to experience it, because it's like hidden. It's hidden in plain sight. Because the language doesn't really provide for it, other than, for example, that most people don't even know that the word human means earthling. Have you known that before you heard it today? It's ridiculous, right? Yeah. Yeah. And it is, it's funny on one level, but on another level it isn't really, isn't it? It's crazy. Yeah. So what to do about that, Because you can't really, you can't really hear it one time and then be changed, It's not like, it's like learning a skill, really, like when we learn to play an instrument or drive a car or something. I think you probably remember how it was the first time. It was like totally awkward, right? You could never imagine that you could, for example, drive and have a conversation and eat a sandwich all at the same time. It was like that. I hardly make it, And I think it's the same with this kind of understandings. They need to be, it need to be repeated many, many times, that it really can sink in and change us on this kind of, on this, on a really deep level. And first, we need to have the necessary interest, to do it. And then it's basically a rewiring, which needs to happen. And that's takes a lot of willingness, to be with that process, and needs to be done, not just by one person, but by a good amount of people, so that it has enough influence, onto the way how we go about organizing our lives. It will take many generations probably, for it to really take a hold, of enough people. But this is the trajectory I think we need to go, to really take the time to make ourselves available for that transition. It needs to be embodied by enough people, and we are just at the beginning of it. And nobody knows exactly, how that all is going to pan out, of course. And I think it's a very interesting time also, to be alive, where this, becomes more and more clear that it is not something which can be solved with the intellect, but the intellect is more or less, just like a signpost. You read the statistics and you read the articles and you read the urgency, of the situation, but then it just stays kind of here, or maybe goes a little bit here, and there's like a lot of fear and discomfort, and then we just keep on going in the same way, But for this to really go anywhere, it needs to be really, we need to be informed by it, which means it really needs to sink into our form. That's the word information. Means it has to really go in, into throughout the whole body, and then going through the discomfort is almost like, if you have, the plumbing is completely kind of, we have to develop new neural pathways, basically, And in the beginning, that's very stressful, because it's like you have feeling, there's the plumbing in the the energetic plumbing in the body, and it's so clogged up, because it hasn't been, those pathways haven't been used, But they are here because, all of us, we've had indigenous forebears, in our distant past, so we have that capacity in us, but we haven't used it for a very long time. So to start using it again, it feels very kind of unpleasant. There's a lot of discomfort, Like any kind of a habitual things, if you change them in the beginning, it's very difficult because it's painful, it's very stressful. If we have taken a lot of substances and so on for some time and then we stop, it's painful in the beginning, because we haven't, the other pathways are all not really developed well. So to have the resilience, to go through that process of opening up the new pathways again, or the very old pathways, to remember them, to bring them together again, to bring them online again is really painful. And that's why many people don't want to do it, because they think, oh, it's painful, it's wrong. But painful just means painful, it doesn't mean wrong, So, and that's why the scaffolding of the Noble Eightfold Path is so important, because we have kind of that idea, if something is painful, it's wrong, and I shouldn't do it. So and to decouple that is very important, that painful is not wrong, painful is painful. And of course, we need to be careful and not to bite off more than we can chew, but you have to just bite it off, one bite at a time, and chew that one, swallow, digest, and then the next one. And that's how it's done, And then once you've done it, it wasn't that difficult, So it's always the same thing, really. It's always about developing resilience to be able to step out of old habits, which are no longer serving life, but which are just like, basically the opposite of serving life, destroying life. And keeping us imprisoned, in wasting our time and dragging a lot of other life forms down with us, So the Noble Eightfold Path, as a support for that, and it's like a guiding star. One doesn't need to get it all right from the first day because that would be impossible. But it's like a master plan, and one embodies as much as one can, and then becomes slowly stronger. Because as we are letting go of unskillful habits of basically wasting our energy, wasting our time, wasting our whatever resources we have, as we are becoming more skillful, we are having more and more strength, to live what we know is serving us, and then it has its own, the path has its own intelligence, And difficult doesn't mean wrong. Difficult is just, okay, if we learn something we have never done before, of course it's difficult in the beginning, It would be strange if it wouldn't be. And yeah, I think that's, And, you know, and pushing oneself is also not what the Noble Eightfold Path is all about, but it's becoming more precise, you know, taking more interest and having curiosity, you know, how do I actually waste my time, you know, how do I distract myself? What's my preferred strategies, you know, to do this? And then see, maybe you don't need to do that. Maybe you can just not do it and see how that feels, you know. And there's no need, you know, to blame oneself or to put oneself down or anything like that. It's about just, it's an experiment, you know, and trying something different. And seeing, you know, or maybe, you know, reading stories of people who have done things with their lives, you know, which are inspiring to you. That can also really help. So I think, again, stopping and asking if there's like, does anybody want to ask something or share something from your own practice? Yes, please.
Thank you for that. I guess my question, like I've been on this path and I've been trying to practice, and I feel like I've got an awareness of things, bad habits that I've sort of fallen into automatically, and you know, trying to trust the fact that this idea that you're putting forward is that the awareness is in self. That's kind of as much as I can do, and keep showing up, and so I'm being patient with myself, but I also feel this tremendous urgency to do something. You know, I've got friends who are climate, you know, I'm doing whatever I can for climate stuff, but I've got friends who are, you know, showing up and doing demonstrations and being, you know, and it does feel like there's this tremendous urgency to do something.
Right.
But then it also feels like if I'm trying to work on myself and like so I guess I'm just trying to, I guess my question.
The paradox of those two things, yeah.
Like, how did,
You know, I really like that. I really like the saying, does anybody of you have, you know, bioaccumulaffe? You know, I've sent you. Bioaccumulaffe, he says, times are urgent, we need to slow down, you know? Because if we are acting from that urgency, you know, just to do something, because it needs to come from the right place, we need to do something which is really helpful rather than just doing something, you know? Because it can be just, I want to get rid of my nervousness, I want to get rid of my guilt, I want to get rid of my fear, and I just want to do something, you know? But then it's more like, the most important thing is to first know who you really are. You know, I don't mean you have to get fully enlightened or anything, but meaning, you know, to really understand, because then it would take a very long time, I suppose, because then I wouldn't be teaching here either, you know, because I'm not. But at least, you know, understanding to a certain extent what I just was saying, and we can do a guided meditation on that later, is, you know, that these bodies are earth bodies, you know. And if you have a better understanding of how your body is really part of nature and has a reason out of nature, you know, when you have a certain basic understanding of that, I think then you have a way of, you can listen to the earth, you know, what you are called to do, what is the right thing to do. So I think if somebody asks me, you know, what should I do, or I feel this urge to do something, I think rather than immediately doing something only that you feel a little bit better about yourself, so then become aware of that, you know, because you want to be like the other guys who are already doing something and you don't know what to do. So then, you know, what you can do is you could ask the earth what she wants from you, you know. That's what I do that every day, for example, you know. I do that every day since quite a long time. And I feel like I know what to do, you know, now, but I didn't immediately know it, you know. So rather than I just throw out my energy to do something, I think if you want to do something, then just ask that, Make have a little place where you live, put up an image of the earth, maybe have a little altar, whatever you can do, and then go there every day and bow and ask. Yeah, that's what I think, and the answer will come, Yeah. Because, the earth speaks to us through our bodies, because, we eat food, we drink water, we breathe the air. It's all, we are constantly eating the earth, isn't it? We are the earth and we eat the earth, and then we go to the bathroom and goes out again, and then that goes into the sewage, that goes into the soil, that makes food again. So we are in constant exchange with her, But somehow, our language and our way of thinking, our education has covered over that very simple truth, which quite a few of the indigenous people living today still know, because they haven't been so over-educated and lived so removed from the living earth, I mean, the concrete of the cities is also made from earth, of course, but it's hard to communicate with concrete, If you're not on acid or something, you can't do it. But then you can, but we don't have the time for that now. But what I mean is, you really need to kind of come back to the basics and have a very simple practice, which you can remember, which you can really do every day, and asking the earth for guidance is something everybody can do, 2 minutes, a day, if you don't have the time, and have a striking image, Because it's a living being, the earth is a living being, and we are part of her, like ants in an ant hill or something like that, we can imagine it like that, and then ask, what can I do to be part of the immune system of the earth,
Beautiful. As you were talking, I was thinking that there's a kind of an arrogance that probably many people were brought up under the guidance of, and like when I was a baby, they were saying, don't breastfeed, feed formula, it's better, and don't have natural birth, right?
It's
better
for money.
Don't have natural birth, cesarean. It's all like there's this kind of arrogance that's sort of brought, that I think I was brought up under, the idea that we're separate from the earth, that we can make formula.
But arrogance is born out of fear, Arrogance is a pretend that I'm better than you, but in reality, when you look underneath, you see there's a lot of fear of being out of control, And then modernity was trying, to get everything under control, and the result is, I mean, I don't need to tell you, the result is crazy, isn't it? It's dangerous, really. Yeah. And there's one book, I really warmly recommend to anybody who has time to read. And you can also find on the website, I've put out some cards on my website. There's a page which is called The Earth, Our Teacher, and there is quite some books on there. And there's one book I warmly recommend, which is called Hospicing Modernity. And, just trying to understand how we are deeply conditioned by modernity, and modernity being a project of defense against loss of control, And that's, that has been done for a few hundred years now, and obviously we're at the end of it, because it can no longer pretend it's working. And now we have to kind of collectively hospice it with a lot of kindness, because we just can't cut it off like that. It's impossible. But we need to get a hospice modernity and midwife that which doesn't have a name yet. We don't know what's going to be the next response, of our species. But You know, there's people who are very much trying to go back deeper into modernity and trying to rip out even more and extract and so on, and want to go back to a golden age, you know, which has never existed anyway, but is also a fear response, you know. And then people can get, you know, pretty psychotic, you know, because there is so much uncertainty, you know. So this is why we really need a strong scaffolding, you know, to be able to open to the uncertainty and to align ourselves with what wants to be born, you know, even we don't know what it's going to be. So it's a very powerful time, you know, to consciously be born at a time when a cultural paradigm is dying, you know, obviously, and we don't know what the next one will be, how it's going to be called, how we're going to do it, you know. But that's what's happening, I think.
I apologize in advance for this question.
Why?
Well, you know me, I love the cosmic questions, but what if we don't manage to change the paradigm and the thinking, and then there is no earth to come back to in the samsara? Like, what if the earth has a cycle of life and death just like we do? Then what?
Yeah, it does have a cycle of life and death, you know, but it's said, you know, that in about, I think, 500 billion years, you know, when the sun basically explodes, you know, then the earth will also be taken down. But I don't worry about in 500 million years, you know, that's so long. That's also a distraction to worry about that, you know. Just we need to now do something. Maybe we need to now really take an interest, you know. And I think, you know, if you're still not enlightened in 500 million years, you're going to be reborn probably on a different planet if the Earth is not here anymore. But for the next, until the sun explodes, the Earth is going to be here. You know, we don't need to worry about that piece. So we just, and I think, you know, the Earth we can't destroy the Earth or anything. It's just our own species, you know, our responsibility for future generations, I think, and also other species which we take down, you know. For me, it's mainly our responsibility for future generations, you know. And most of the indigenous people live like that, you know, always thinking about the next 7 generations, and whatever you do, thinking what effect does it have. So to just, you know, start with something relatively small. That's not small either, you know, but to start like that, I think, and yeah, I think that would be, that's something, you know, which we can do, which we really can relate to, you know, yeah. Yeah, and samsara is you know, it's quite likely, I think, you know, for anyone being born as a human being, you know, if we are doing relatively okay, it's quite likely we're going to be born here again, you know. Yeah. Which sounds a bit scary, right?
Not for me. I like it here.
Yeah. But I don't know if he's going to still like it in 30 years here. I mean, I hope, you know. Yeah. I hope.
Yeah. Me too.
Yeah. Have you seen, you know, like predictions of how the Bay Area is going to look in 50, 60, 80, 100 years? Have you seen?
No.
Yeah, look it up.
I won't be here.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I hope I can articulate this. I like the imagery or the symbology of, on the night of Buddha's enlightenment, him touching the earth and connecting and having the earth witness him. And that brings to mind the idea of kind of an engaged Buddhism. But at the same time, our practice is very personal, right? Our practice is impermanence, non-attachment, no suffering, which in my mind draws me not necessarily into myself, but I'm disconnecting from my clothes, my car, my apartment. So how do I justify those two goals which seem at odds?
Yeah, I think, that's what the path, the path consists of two parts. There's like the ultimate, what you're speaking about in the meditation, where you understand, the big things, how the laws of nature work. But then there's the conventional path, is about your daily life, about right livelihood, about ethics, about the way, how you show up, what you work, how you shop, how you eat, all of those things. They both work together, They support each other. And we need both, And the more we are capable, and I think the happier we are, depends on how the more we can embody, what we know to be true in our lives. And that takes time, of course, And then the more we can really bring that into our lives and live accordingly, the more we feel probably fulfilled in our lives also, And the more that is going apart, the unhappier we feel, I think. And yeah, does that make sense? Yeah, but I think, we do need to stop, and go inside. And then when we come out, we need to live from that place. And then you stop again. It's like breathing in and breathing out. If you always breathe in and never breathe out, it's not going to work. So it's both, As long as we have a body, it is both. We need to do both. And and sometimes there is people who don't want to be bothered with the conventional world, and then they want to completely withdraw and so on, and then live in a very kind of controlled world where there's no stress coming from outside. It's not working, and those people have often very little capacity, very little resilience, because they are dependent on everything being peaceful all the time, so that life isn't like that, But if you have had, some insights in the meditation, you can bring that and take that into the hothouse, of your daily life, and not completely go crazy, or get lost, because you have seen it so clearly, that you can keep that faith, and then nothing can really completely throw you off, But then, it's really, and then you come out, you test it again, and then you go back, and this is how it gets really strong. If you just do one, you're very vulnerable, Either totally vulnerable on everything being peaceful, or, having no kind of capacity for any kind of concentration. And therefore you're not seeing anything, Because it's that you're not seeing certain patterns, which is draws us into the path, And the first one, the most obvious one, being impermanence, Thinking, really seeing, yes, it's true, everything has a has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and I might not have to always interfere with everything. I can just allow life to speak for itself, you know? And then once that becomes something which really resonates, you know, there's some kind of resonance in the heart, you know, that there's a certain significance we notice, you know? And then there is the motivation, you know, to live into that significance. And then you embody it more, you know, and then that gives you a more of a holding, you know, then you can be with more dissonance. And that's like, it's always like a back and forth, you know. Until then, you know, complete unshakability, like the Buddha, you know, under the Bodhi tree. Because he had slowly built it up over lifetimes, if that sounds anything you can trust, but you don't need to, you know. But it's something, it's taking the long-term view and, you know, and basically sitting it out, you know. Yeah. Please.
So I'm preoccupied with this question of how do we resolve this direct opposition in the culture that we have and the path? Mm-hmm. How do we get more people to experience and to taste enough that mm-hmm. they can make the change? Because it's not, I don't see it happening.
Yeah. I think, you know, very important is, I think, to really not go into polarization, to not feed the polarization, you know, and to really be what you know to be true, you know, and trust that it's gonna be, it's for those, you know, for those who can see it, it's gonna be contagious, you know, and for those who can't, because they are not yet receptive, there's nothing we can do, you know. But you need to be, you know, if your life and the way you are needs to be the answer, you know, and it needs to become so attractive, you know. Because, you know, when I was ready, when I had enough, so to say, you know, I've recognized in my teacher, who was in his 80s, that he knew it. I wouldn't have recognized it before because I just couldn't see it. I wasn't ready, you know. And this is a law of nature, you know. There's nothing we can do about it. Yeah, and you know, and it's not our thing to worry about what if kind of a thing, you know, because you can only do what you can do, and the rest is not up to you, or to me, or to anybody, you know. But I think if you really, also what you were saying, I forgot your name. What's Tom? You know, when he was saying, but what can I do? You know, if you really want to do, ask. You know, ask. You'd be surprised to what comes of it, you know. Because we are, in some ways, you know, we are much too complicated how we're thinking, you know. That's part and parcel of the whole, you know, of this defense, you know, against being part of a living, intelligent earth, you know. And basically, you know, finding our way back to that, you know, after we have gone all the way to Mars and back, you know, because it didn't work. So, but first we need to go, you know, and try, because that's just how we are, you know. Yeah. We need to try first, and then once we got the message, you know, then you have the humility and come back and say, okay, it didn't work. So, but those, you know, those going here and there and everywhere, it wasn't for nothing, you know, it wasn't in vain, because it gets us ready, you know, because if you tried everything else and it didn't work, I mean, I've tried a lot of things before I then finally said, okay, I'm gonna do it, you know. Without having tried those things, I wouldn't have been ready, you know. So it all belongs, I think it all belongs to it. And it doesn't just happen, on an individual level, it happens on a collective level too, as a worldview and things like that. This is how maturing works, It's like, it would be great if it would be different, but that's how it works, And then, it doesn't mean that we are not sad or angry or things like that, when we see those things, but it won't help, But if we are willing, to work with those things, it will help us to mature, And then if we are maturing, then we can have more impact, Because maturing means, wisdom and compassion, basically. And then we are just much more capable of living from that place, Yeah, it is a very, it's very different than what you think it is. But it's, because thinking isn't really the best tool, Yeah. But it takes us a very long time to get to this, because we are indoctrinated in that way, but not because anybody wants us to be unhappy or something. This is just how we are, we people. Yeah. It's a very mixed bag, everything. Yeah. 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 So maybe if anybody would, from each group, maybe would at least one person want to share a little bit how it was, your exchange. Would you like to share a little? Yeah? Okay. Whoever's ready. Yeah.
I was struck, I don't know any of these people.
Yeah.
but I was struck by how similar and how relatable all four of our experiences were. And something each person said, I was like, oh yeah, me too. And
Do you want to give an example?
Wendy?
Yeah,
Is that her
Wendy.
name? She said something about living her life. Sorry, I hope I'm not disclosing. No, I feel the same way. Something to the effect of not having a goal in life. It's kind of tumbling through life was the word she used. And I feel the exact same way. Despite having gone to school and worked for 20-some years, I'm at this point in my life now where I'm like, what do I want to do when I grow up?
Yeah.
And Kathy said, fear and having been brought up in a family of, as an only child, me too. And there was so much relation in a room with people I'm just meeting today. And then just juxtaposing that with, it all doesn't matter, right? What am I going to lead into next? What I've done up until now, and my life stories is, I've been running away from fear myself, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm here now. I'm in this room now. What's my next step going to be? And that's kind of where I need to sit and look at that. Where's my next footfall going to be? Because all this really doesn't matter, right? And I say that to you, Wendy, just with, you have a lovely energy, and thank you for bringing Ayya. Right? There's your goal. Yeah, it's just, so it's just nice to know that, yeah, I've lived this life. I too have regrets, but I'm here now, and there is something to do, right? Whether it's me touching the earth and having it witness me and everything I've become, or me just sitting in what I am in this moment. Yeah, there's a hope in that, I think. I think.
You know, the regrets we have, they need to be composted, you know, because otherwise it'd be a waste of time. But if you use it, you know, for composting, then nothing is wasted, you know, nothing really.
That's a good metaphor, compost.
Yeah. Yeah, composting, yeah. Anybody else from the other group? Anybody wants to share? Yeah. Please. With your amazing coat. There's whales, isn't it? Are they?
Little whale.
Yeah. Very cool.
So I kind of realized this after we had all talked, so I'm going to say a few things too. And some of it was kind of what we had talked about. But I think I just realized that I've been going through life kind of similar to you in some ways in my 20s, where I was doing some inappropriate thing, or where I wasn't confronting the pain that I should have been.
It's appropriate for a 20-year-old one.
Yeah.
Isn't it? It's just if you keep doing it until you're 80, then it's a bit of a problem, you know?
That's it.
Yeah.
That's very true, yeah. So avoiding pain, like I would even I would lie to people, white lies, right? Just to avoid confrontation. And it wasn't until I gained concentration and mindfulness that I realized I was doing some of those things. So it was, it's like, I guess that's sort of the perpetual cycle that I'm trying to break. is that bit of taking the right and the appropriate actions and things in life.
Thank you. Anybody else who want to share something? Tara?
Oh, me?
Yeah.
She name checked me.
Yeah, I did. Because you're the person I know the longest in this room.
Well, what I shared was that the way I've lived my life up until this point was kind of as a seeker of meaning. And I was looking for, you know, a lens to look at my life or my childhood and the things, my trauma. I was looking for a lens to view my trauma as like an evolutionary thing or something that, you know, so that I could become a generative person and not a victim of the things that had happened. And so like my whole life's journey has been in support of that. Like everything I've done has been about that. And now I'm a trauma therapist.
You did it really
so I did it. But what I was thinking about was that, and what I wanted to express in the smaller group and also to the larger group is that, you know, Sangha, when the Buddha said that the Sangha is really the jewel, like that's been so true for me that, you know, because the people that I was born to just didn't have the skills or the ability to do right by me, but I was blessed my whole life of people along the road and along the path that could point me in another direction. And it's just the older I get, the more I realize like it's all about relationship. And so like-minded people, what a gift. And so thank you to everyone in this room for gathering in for this purpose. It really touches my heart. Like I could even get a little weepy, but I won't. Yeah. So God bless the Sangha.
Thank you.
Buddha bless.
Yeah, very good. Thank you. Yeah, it is really pretty, it would be impossible without Sangha, really. Yeah. So what's the time? Okay, do you. Oh, of course, yes, please. Do you want to share something?
Haley,
Do you want to? Do you want to share for the online people?
Oh, no, not me.
No?
No, we're good. We talked about yeah, the way that we were and who we were was kind of really within the world and participating, and through our various paths we got away from that, and there's certain practices like gardening or growing food that we can do in order to reconnect.
Okay, good. And I know Renata is a great gardener, Renata, right? Because Renata I know because she sometimes comes, to the Earth Room, and she brought me a beautiful plant some months ago, Renata, right? You are a great
How is
gardener.
it doing? Is it doing okay?
Yeah, it's fine. I look after it. It's doing fine. You have
Yeah.
to come and check it out one day again.
Yes, I've been meaning to.
Okay, good.
Doing well.
Yeah. Okay, we have now 20 minutes left. If there does anybody have any other question or comment? Because if nothing is coming, then we could just do like a 20-minute guided meditation for closing. Yeah. We wait till Ankit is back. Take your time. No pressure.
While we're waiting,
Yeah.
are there any other practices that you can recommend as part of the general sort of Buddhist practice around connecting with the earth?
I'm going to lead us now in one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You should ask.
Yeah. But one would definitely, until Ankit comes back, is really about just we can simply, kind of, for example, you could, have a certain walk you do, I don't know your life situations, but I go on a certain walk, there's a certain place I return back to often, and it becomes a kind of a place where there's a rock, quite a rock where I can sit on that rock. And then I just touch the rock and I sit there, and sometimes when I'm really all over the place, I go there, or when I'm really relaxed or whatever, and then just sit there and connect with the rock, and ask questions sometimes, and then I put my hands on it, and then I just wait. Sometimes something is coming back, and one can do that, any kind of a place which calls you, and just where you can go out in nature and kind of touch the earth or a tree or any kind of a more than human ally, That's something I do. And then, when eating, to remember that, the earth element in the body, which is particular, we can feel it, in the bones in the body, or on the fingernails, the teeth, the hardness. That's a direct experience of earth element. And for example, before you eat, just remember that earth element on the plate or in the plate, I don't know how one says, you eat, and then it becomes part of your body, really, until it's excreted again at one point, and then the water you drink, or the water that goes in the toilet where you live, is the water of the watershed you're living. It goes through the earth, and then it comes to you from the faucet. You drink it, it goes through you, it goes in the bathroom, it goes back into the earth, and then it comes out again. So that your body is part of the watershed where you live. It's just expanding perception, basically, and then the breathing, because the planet doesn't end, at the floor, because the planet goes up several miles, the atmosphere around, is part of the planet. And and all of those things, the earth element, the water element, the air, and it's the planet is an almost completely closed system. There's very rarely a meteor flies in or something, and sometimes a a satellite or some spaceship goes out, but generally it's a closed system, you know, and it recycles itself since deep time, you know, and these bodies are part of it, you know, just these kind of contemplations, you know, can really expand perception. And then we can more appreciate, you know, that we are part of this intelligent systems which has a, you know, which has a self-regulating capacity, and we can become representation of that self-regulation, you know, and that we take in the seriousness of the situation, you know, and that we need to, but not like in a way like getting completely stressed out and scared or anything, but more saying, okay, you know, I really see the need, you know, that things need to change, and we can't change it from the intellect, you know. The intellect is supportive, but the depths of the change needs to be first experienced in oneself, you know, that we don't understand ourselves anymore as being on top of the planet, you know, taking things out and throwing things away, because number one, there is no away, because it's only the planet, you know. There's nothing, we can't throw it into outer space. So all of, you know, this, the use of language has, of course, deeply conditioned the thinking, you know. So we need to really go to that, to the beginning of the beginning in terms of the way how we think. That's where the key lies, you know, to change, I think. And that's a spiritual practice, you know. So, and then, you know, I think the kind of, the impetus for doing something, you know, in the world comes if you first take care of that other part, you know. Because then there is also, then we have the capacity to actually hear what is being said. And I feel like that's how I have been, you know, been doing it. And I remember, you know, when I did for the first time, when I had that deep kind of recognition that there's something going really pretty damn wrong, you know, is when I was like, I think I was 15, on a trip, you know, when I saw indigenous people in a certain part of the world, you know, how they were walking on the earth, just simply. And I saw, you know, we have forgotten this, you know. We have so much overlay, you know, of scientific and other education, that we have lost that very important recognition that we are not on top, that we are part, you know. And the human supremacy kind of conditioning, you know. And then once, it was just one moment of insight, you know, and then I came back to that insight again and again and again and again and again in my life, you know, and slowly basically have worked with that really a lot, you know, and then opportunities arose, you know, and I could recognize them. Because, you know, opportunities can arise quite often, but if we can't recognize them as opportunities, then it's the same as if they hadn't happened, you know what I mean? So it's more like, you know, cleaning of the filters, you know. And then whenever an opportunity arises to enact it, to do it, you know, even if it's scary, you know, sometimes. And then it's like, it's a process, you know. It's not like that you sit at home and read 500 books and study, and then you have the idea and you do it. It's not like that, you know. It's more like, it's much more like kind of, it's more like you have the guiding star, you know, and then you walk, and then you fall down, and then you fall into a pit, and then you break your leg, and then you just keep going, you know, keep going. And then, you know, and then you look back, oh, you know, I walked like several miles, you know, before I thought I can't even go 3 meters without having a nervous breakdown. And then you actually can do it. You know, that's how it is, you know. It is much lower to the ground, you know, than what we think. So, and that's, you know, And having a practice, whatever, Buddhist or otherwise, something which makes enough sense that you can remember it and have enough faith that you can believe that it could help, That's kind of, that's enough, And the willingness to engage with the messiness of the process, because, most kind of people who want to get away from here either do Mass or do sit in heaven with God, or the other options of getting away from here is because people are afraid of the messiness of the embodied life, where there's so much uncertainty, But that's where we are, and we, as much as we might want to be somewhere else, we are here. And to just stop thinking about going to Mass or I think there's quite a few Christian people who want to, I think it's called rapture, isn't it? They want to get beamed up, and Trump is going to be the prophet who is going to lead everybody. I mean, this is just so nuts. I mean, this is a psychosis, really, This is like the biggest avoidance you can, it's really sick, I mean, that you can see, how mad it has become, everything. That there's really people who believe that this is possible, and this is just very, I sometimes think, a movie, it can't be true, but it is true. It's really happening, Yeah. So it's really important to see that how far people can go, out of fear. Nothing. Yeah. Because it isn't, it's like the same, you have a room which you haven't cleaned up for 50 years. It looks really messy. Every time you look in, you just bang the door because you just can't bear it, And the longer you wait, the worse it gets, right? And once you get started, you do every day a little bit, it's not that bad, So, yeah. Yeah.
I remember when I learned transcendental meditation when I was 18, and after you get your mantra in transcendental meditation, you have to go back to the teacher a few times to get your meditation checked. And so I was at my 2-week checkup, and I said, yeah, ever since I learned how to meditate, I bought a car, I moved, I broke up with my boyfriend, I got a different job, and the teacher was just grinning. He's like, life-supporting changes. And that's what, that's just what came to mind when you were talking about, how scary it is to open the closet, everything's gonna fall out.
Yeah.
But you don't even know what's in there because there's so much, what's underneath all that stuff.
Yeah.
You have to let it fall, you let it arise before you can see.
Yeah. Is that really happened in 2 weeks now? Yeah. Really? There was
It's an eventful 2 weeks.
but now you have, you have done regular cleaning. It's not going to happen like that anymore.
That was not, that just, yeah, I still have closets.
Really?
That's the human experience. I'm just talking about the first 2 weeks after I got a mantra.
And you're working now as a trauma therapist?
Yeah, Chris and I are both in 2 different practicums together. I'm graduating this summer, and he'll be graduating, but you start doing the work still while you're in school.
Yeah,
so.
but weren't you working for some kind of government thing?
Yeah, still there.
What was that quickly?
The San Francisco Police Department.
Yeah, they need a lot of trauma therapists, I'm sure.
I have a therapy chair in my office where they come and sit.
Yeah. Do
It
you
was
also
busy
work there?
One day it was a huge
No.
scandal, and then everybody had to tell the whole story.
Yeah. Will you stay in the police when you have done?
That's the population I'm going to work with.
Yeah.
I can't retire for 3 more years, so
Yeah.
I'll do both. I've been doing both for the last 2 years, so I'll do that.
Yeah.
Until I go to therapy full time.
Because I think the people who work for the police, they need that a lot, isn't it?
They sure do.
Because then they'd be much more careful how they treat people of color, for example. Yeah. Wow, I mean, that's amazing, yeah. But I really, I think the guided meditation, forget about it. It's not enough time. But but I really like that. Seeing Earth, as a living, intelligent being, and those of the population who can hear, that that things need to change, we can basically volunteer to be part of the immune system, Rather than attacking, we can, and to a certain extent, we always gonna be part of, we are all complicit, because, I used that microphone and it came with the car, and we are all complicit, but we can do both, On the one hand, we are still complicit because it's impossible to live in this paradigm without being complicit, but using the energy, which we extract from the system in order to build something better, and which will take generations, but we can surely do something,
Be that signpost for other people.
And also, and that place, where they can feel safe to speak about things, and where you can inspire, and knowing, that it's not all like a linear one-to-one kind of a thing, there's a mystery to do all of this, and keep some space open for that, And I think, the more one engages, the more the rapport also increases, becomes clearer somehow, because we develop more faith in it, So it has its own intelligence, and it's not just like that we have to figure it all out, because then it'd be hopeless, Yeah, would be hopeless, Yeah.
I feel like one of the lessons I try to learn from the earth is about compassion, because I just feel like there's nothing more, the earth just takes whatever puts us here, feeds us, does whatever, it takes whatever we put out.
Yeah.
And I feel like, when you talk about our political leaders and these crazy people, I feel like how do I find that compassion for these people who I feel like are doing tremendous harm, and
Yeah.
and
But they're so obviously so traumatized,
yeah.
It's really like, isn't they say that Jesus said on the cross or something, they don't know what they're doing? I think it is like that, Yeah. It is, I would rather like to stop them, but somehow but I just don't know how to do it, Yeah. I'm going right away after that with Wendy. We're gonna go to the San Francisco Zen Center. They have a benefit for Gaza tonight, Yeah. Gaza is the most intense, crazy hotspot on the planet, because there's so much trauma over so many generations, over such long time. It's just people are completely out of their minds, It's terrible. Yeah. What I would like to do? I would like to share the benefit of our practice today with the people in Gaza. Would that be okay with everybody?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you so much for the invitation, and greetings to Noam. And say Noam, they should do something about the phone or something. May you have every good blessing. May all the devas protect you by the power of all the Buddhas. May you ever be well. May you have every good blessing. May all the devas protect you by the power of all the Dhamma. May you ever be well. May you have every good blessing. May all the devas protect you by the power of all the Sangha. May you ever be well. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.